All right. Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. Today we got a very special episode. We're doing a little crossover action, a little feet over feet on the ice here with Sharks expert Eric Landy of Teal Town, USA. Welcome, Eric. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, Randon. How about you?
Oh man, it's been a while since we talked, and I'm doing great. Having my cup of Joe, right here, and just trying to wake up before the Niners play in the afternoon. So not doing too bad. Not doing too bad. Hockey's just around the corner. Finished last preseason game last night for the Kings. I don't know, is the Sharks done with the preseason?
The Sharks started their global series on Friday evening. Well, it's actually Friday 11 a.m. on PST, but yeah, they start the season early with the Nashville Predators. So they have the two quick games set over in Czech Republic, and then we will start the home season on Friday. And it'll be a good tilt against the Carolina Hurricanes with Bernsey returning at the tank. So it should be a good one. And it'll be our third regular season game. So we've kind of got some of the questions out of the way already, which is good for me because it kind of was a transition over from preseason, and we've got the roster set from there. So it's gives you a little bit better idea of what the roster is going to take shape like. And again, cool to represent San Jose and Northern California out in Czech Republic. So.
Yeah, it's so weird though when that happens, right? It doesn't feel like regular season yet, but it is regular season, because
It's
it's
like
just over
almost like a
there.
preseason series kind of thing. That's kind of how I look at it. But it did give us some answers. And it did kind of show where the direction of the organization is. Because I think you'll see when we go through the update and preview, things have changed. So
Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking all things Sharks and Kings, kind of have the preseason going on, expectations, what biggest news stories. Obviously, Sharks, a longtime rival, so we want to know what's going on up north. Stay tuned to find out. Here we go. Well, thank you for all you listeners coming in here. I know it's early on the West Coast, getting your fantasy lineups ready to go, having your coffee with us as well. But let's talk some hockey. Landy, you were on here last year talking about expectations, and you were very skeptical. A lot of stuff that needed to go right for the Sharks. Obviously, they did not go right for the Sharks with the standings. But overall, how did last season go for you? What is the temperature among Sharks fans? Maybe as the changing the guard is about to happen.
yeah, I mean, I think last season is kind of what we expected. The team had a lot of roster commitments to older players, and a lot of money tied up in the defense. So, of course, going into this season, there was going to need to be some changing of the guard, needed to be some freeing up of the cap. So, yeah, there were some major changes implemented. And I guess the first we can go over is just the regime change, right? You had Doug Wilson going out with medical reasons halfway through last year. And really, I think once that happened, it kind of put the whole team kind of in limbo. I think the interim general manager, that was Joe Will, did a good job of doing a lot of interviews and highlighting new candidates that would be great for a GM position. And Mike Greer, happened to one out in the off season for that position. And for me, it does signal the changing of the guard. So in respect to what I expected from last season, I expected a team that was going to be plucky, maybe something that was going to, be 5 or 6 points out of a wild card, kind of putting up a little bit of a fight, but honestly not really expecting much. And they kind of ended up right about where I expected, right? A team that's going to probably lose at least 40 games or so, maybe hover around that 500 or just below that 500 mark. And that's absolutely what we got last year.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like they have the talent there, obviously with Timo Meyer and the those guys to win a few games here and there. The goaltending was going to be spotty. We knew that was a big thing, So, it seemed like a team that could win some games, steal some wins, steal some points, but really didn't have that full momentum going forward. Carter Scores coming in here. He's a longtime Kings fan, always on the pod here. Let's start with his first question. Do you wish the Sharks could take back the Carlson contract?
It's at this point we've seen what the returns are from Ottawa and what those players ended up being, and it ended up being Tim Stützle and Josh Norris going the other way, and Chris Tierney. Three very good pieces. One being a prospect that's probably now got a high 2A type center in Josh Norris, and a 1B, 1A type winger in Tim Stützle. And you've looked at what the output of that contract has been with Erik Karlsson as a Shark, and it just hasn't lived up to the money. And again, this was a player that the Sharks didn't even play ball on contract wise. They told him he was going to be the number one highest paid defenseman. There wasn't really any kind of negotiation or any kind of extended talk about, how the structure was going to fit into the salary cap. So, when you pay a guy $11.5 million, it's going to take up quite a bit of resources on the cap, and that's going to necessitate moves to be made. So that Erik Karlsson contract had a direct ripple effect on, keeping Pavelski here. If you were going to keep Pavelski or Evander Kane, and we know how that saga ended up, we lost a Jonas Donskoy, and we also lost a Gus Nyquist. Those were direct cap casualties because of Erik Karlsson. And I think most Sharks fans will tell you that he hasn't been worth the price of admission. And I feel for the guy, because there has been some freak injuries that have come along the way. But I also, I sometimes I question the commitment level. Sometimes I question the the willingness to give it all when you're down a couple of goals, and just, he seems like a guy that if things are not working his way, can kind of pout a little bit, and can kind of be a guy who doesn't look to push through adversity at times. Looks like a guy that's comfortable out there to me. And again, I think just hasn't lived up to expectations and to billing of what he was supposed to be. So I think if you polled most Sharks fans, they would say yes, they'd like to take that contract back, but you're kind of stuck with it now, and I don't think that there's any way you can move that at this point.
Yeah, it seemed like a kind of a desperation move to stay relevant, similar to what the Kings did with Kovalchuk. Obviously, easier out, when you're not paying Kovalchuk 8 years or 7 years or whatever, you can kind of move on from that. And it seems like the Sharks would like to, but they can't. Let's get into the new regime, like you brought up, right? You look in the draft; they're kind of seeming to look towards the future. They're trying to move as much contracts as they can. Obviously, longtime Shark Burns, moved. They ate some of his contract. They're trying to do as much as they can to move forward. But, they traded back in the draft to incur more draft picks, ended up drafting Philip Bystedt out of Linköping in Sweden. It seems like they're trying to move forward and gather the pipeline and really start to do what the Kings were doing, and making some moves by moving out some contracts when they can, not really trying to force anything. Is that kind of accurate in your opinion?
I think that the work had already kind of started. This all started maybe a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when Doug Wilson Jr. took over the prime scouting director role with the Sharks. You saw them have a change in the type of player that they wanted to go and select in the draft, more towards a skill type forward with high ceiling, and more boomer bust type picks, more explosive type picks. And we're just starting to see the trickles of that come in. I mean, Eklund and Bordelot were part of the old regime's draft. So I think you're seeing a continuation of that with Mike Greer and his staff, and the way in which they're selecting players is more geared toward the future, like you had said. I think that there's now maybe a little bit more emphasis in total roster construction on veteran type players, because the guys that we thought were going to compete for jobs in camp ended up not getting those jobs, or ended up having a veteran kind of placed in front of them. And we'll get to it in the specific rosters in a second. But I think the team has really kind of moved away from pressing young kids into positions where they need to excel for the Sharks to succeed, and instead kind of shelter them and the Barracuda and the minor leagues before coming up and being actually ready to join the Sharks. So I think that there's been more of an emphasis placed upon the individual players progressing to a point where they'll be able to succeed in the NHL before they're being placed in the NHL, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense. Patience has been the key word for Rob Blake. I mean, almost to a point of over saturation, if you will, in some eyes of Kings fans. We're getting a complete opposite of that this year with Brant Clark making the roster and at least getting his cup of coffee with 9 games. Now, with this new regime moving forward, this next question comes in. Do you think Timo Meier is going to be a $10 million guy, or do you think they move on from him and accrue as many picks as they possibly can?
Timo Meier is interesting because he's a player that you can probably build around, and a player that is a good foundational piece on most teams in the league. So you're going to have to ask yourself, he's going to be, I think, 26, come signing this contract. And, the team's going to have to make the decision. Do they want to make an 8-year commitment to a Timo Meier going forward? I think the obvious question, or the obvious answer, is yes. They need to extend him, and they need to sign him, to keep at least the talent that they have on the roster kind of intact at this point. But like you said, you have that $10 million qualifying offer, and by setting up the contract structure in the way that it is, we're looking at least, I'd say, $7.5 million to get the conversation started. I think it starts at 7.5 over, let's say 8 years, or maybe even like an 8x8 type deal for 64 mil. But it's going to be something north of 7.5 million AAV, I would think. You're going to have to sign this contract before the cap goes up. So you're going to also have to worry about how much he's going to take out of the mix for the rest of the forwards. But this is a guy, I mean, again, these types of forwards don't grow on trees, and 31 other teams would be happy to sign him. So, I don't think it's not, let's say, as huge a mistake if you were going to make that decision to sign him as an Erik Karlsson, because he's younger and because he's got a little bit more of a track record of consistency. But I mean, we said the same thing when Erik Karlsson came to the Sharks, and he had years of Norris Trophy winning. He had great offensive statistics and things like that. So it just goes to show you really don't know about players in general. And hockey, I think, is one of the hardest sports to gauge injury wise, and to gauge how conditioned a player is, because there's different levels of conditioning, right? I feel like there are those who try to get ripped and try to be like an Adonis type, and you just have to look at Rick DiPietro and how chiseled he was as a goaltender, but yet just could not hold it together, just was not hockey healthy. So, similar respect to Erik Karlsson, looks very trim, very cut, very lean, a guy that is looks like an athlete. But over the years, I mean, we've seen that his constitution or fortitude, or however you want to say, his health just hasn't been there. And I think Timo is a guy that's a little bit hardier than Erik Karlsson. He's played through injuries and a guy that will leave everything out on the ice. So if the Sharks do not sign him, it's going to be a big blow, and I don't know how they replace those points. So, I kind of answered the question in a, they kind of have to. You don't want to ever let that kind of young forward slip through. But again, it's a big chunk of change to sign.
Yeah, I mean, every single draft analyst that I've talked to said that this draft is the best draft that is coming up in a long time. The top 3 picks would probably be first overall in the past 5 drafts. So, big thing. And you can get multiple first rounders for Timo Meyer, even on a rental or a sign and dump or something like that. I think he could get north of 10 mil just because of the fact he's a point per game player, and a contending team would want something there, knowing that the cap's going to go up by $10 million within 4 or 5 seasons. So I mean, it's going to be something there. It depends on how much they want to do. They want to do not a rebuild, but like a refresh, if you will. If they want to keep a solid piece there and kind of build around Timo, he is the type of guy that you could do that. But if you're not looking to contend for 3, 4, 5 years, he's going to be 32 years old at that point. Is it really something that you want to keep around? And that's something that management's going to have to figure out. Yeah. So going into camp, obviously the big news for the Kings, they're bringing in, Kevin Fiala. They're bringing in, Brent Clark hype train going on here about his masterful preseason. A lot of stuff to be excited about. What are the biggest news stories coming out of San Jose?
Biggest news stories, I think, has been the shift towards more veteran players. We take a look at the roster right now, and a guy like Luke Kunin, Oscar Lindblom, Steven Lorentz. These are guys that have come in and been those impediments to the younger forwards trying to get a spot. You had both William Eklund and Thomas Bordeleau go over with the Sharks to the Czech Republic, and they had, I would say, Bordeleau had the better of the 2 preseasons. I think he had 2 or 3 goals and 2 or 3 assists. A guy that looks like he's ready to come up, and really a tenacious player. I mean, he's a puck hound. He's a guy that won't get pushed off. He's a little undersized, but I think he makes up for it in heart. And a guy that I'd like to see come up with the Sharks, maybe even before an Eklund, because I just thought he had a better camp. But the other big surprise was that Ryan Merkley, the Sharks' first round pick from 2016, I want to say, but first round pick defenseman, offensive defenseman, they take a little bit of time to ripen up. And there's a big gaping hole on the defense where a Bernsey would have gone, and you would have liked to have seen a Ryan Merkley come up and really grab a hold of that spot, the second pairing offensive defenseman, and really be able to help drive play from the back end. But unfortunately, you got a couple of signings in Matt Benning and let me grab his name, Scott Harrington, excuse me. And I was thinking Stranger Things. But Scott Harrington and Matt Benning kind of added to the roster to really impede or at least make Ryan Merkley have to have a wonderful camp in order to dazzle and get a spot. And again, I think Mike Greer, when he came in, he really wanted to put an emphasis on making players earn spots, and being more veteran reliant versus relying on your rookies or your young forwards to try and backfill. I think he doesn't like that. He didn't like that approach that the Sharks had, and that's something that was immediately changed. And again, I think us as Sharks fans kind of have been left wondering why a guy like Steven Lorentz is playing minutes over a guy like Thomas Bordeleau, who for all intents and purposes is just a better value forward, and a guy that has a higher ceiling. But the floor is higher with a Steven Lawrence or an Oscar Lindbaum or a Luke Kunin. They're just guys that I think that he has a little bit more confidence in, and I just don't think that he has a lot of confidence in younger players.
Yeah, it seems kind of weird because you guys are moving towards the future, but not willing to play some of these guys. Merkley, you would hope. I mean, 2018, he was drafted 4 years in the league so far, been multiple years in the AHL. You'd hope that he would, grasp a spot at least in the top 6, right? I mean, or but he's not even the 7th defenseman right now. Like they're putting him down there, and Kings fans are kind of going through that waiting period, right? Alex Turcotte has yet to make an impact, top 5 pick, and you're going through that kind of thing. Byfield, obviously, Stützle gets the 8-year deal. Byfield is still waiting to take off. So Kings fans can empathize with the envy of wanting first-round picks to hit there. And I'm sure Sharks fans are a little upset that Merkley hasn't really taken that next step to be confident there going forward. We got another question here from Carter Scores. Is Logan Couture going to finish his career in San Jose? Seems like trading him for assets would be ideal for a rebuild. But we also know that Kings fans thought that, hey, Dustin Brown should stay his whole career in LA instead of trading him away for maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick late in his career. What do you feel like that situation is going to end up with Couture?
Well, Couture's the captain, right? And he's one of the longest tenured Sharks now after, Bernsey being let go or traded. I think the only other more veteran player is Marc-Edouard Vlasic. And so, with a guy like Logan, it's going to all depend upon what he wants. I think that if he wants to, play for a contending team and wants to try to win a cup before, he hangs them up, it wouldn't be surprising if he goes and asks for a trade. Now, I'll pull up the contract details for Logan Couture. I don't remember if he's got a modified no trade or not. But this is a guy, again, who came up as a Sharks prospect from Worcester way back when. A guy that has been playing with San Jose his entire career. And, I think a guy that really is comfortable in where he's at. And again, if he's going to be the one that's going to want to make the move, and he's going to be the one that's going to have to push that. Again, he's on the 4th year of an 8-year contract. His contract value is $64 million a year. And if you look at what his AAV is, it's $8 million. So you'd have to eat a little bit of contract there. And then, yes, it's a modified no trade clause. So it's going to all have to be coming from him. So again, I think if he wants to, then I think that the Sharks are a good organization and try to do good by their players. I think that they would try to put them in a position to succeed, but also try to get the maximum value from him. But again, he's got to submit a team list of 3 too, and getting those kind of trades to happen is difficult when you've got those kind of external stressors like a no trade clause.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be one of those things where every single trade deadline from here until his contract is up, it's going to be whispers, right? So it's going to be something going forward there to be interesting to see what he does, and maybe he just wants to end his career there. I mean, obviously every player wants to win a cup. Sharks aren't in that place right now. Maybe that will grow hungrier for him as his contract gets closer to an end. We'll see how that kind of works out here. Coming into the season, we'll actually, I'm not sure coming here. What do you think the Sharks fans have expectations for this year? That was going to be my question. What are the expectations for the Sharks in this upcoming season, in your opinion?
I think for me, it's going to be, again, trying to integrate new players. You had a bunch of flux, and especially in the bottom 6. So you've got the first part of the season is integrating new players and getting the coaching staff, David Quinn, of course, brand new coach, getting that system to stick. So I'd say within the first, let's say 20 to 30 games, I would like to see the team hover around 500, just kind of figuring out the system, figuring out the way in which David Quinn wants to play. And then from there we can really say, okay, where's the angle of trajectory pointed on this thing. But again, I don't think we should be fooling ourselves either. This isn't a team that's going to compete for first in the Pacific. I think that there are at least 3 or 4 better teams than the Sharks in this division. And again, I think that if they compete for a wild card spot, I would be happy with that. Um, my expectation is they'll probably fall short again, maybe even more than they did last year. I think last year they were 6 or 7 points out. I think this year they could even drop a little bit farther down to 10 or maybe even 14 points out. It just really depends upon what this group is gonna gel around. And again, they lost both of the games in the opening series, and it was more of the same. I think better habits and not losing as big, but still losses nonetheless.
Are you? If I were a Sharks fan, I would be on the tank hard for Bedard train already. I'd be having T-shirts made because by all accounts, he's Connor McDavid reincarnated, and that could be something that really just changes your franchise around. You have Mitch Koff out of Russia. You have the Swedish wonder there, which is top 3 pick. There's going to be some really guys that can change the future of a franchise. Are you under the impression that, hey, let's embrace this. Let's embrace this tear down. Let's do a rebuild the way it's supposed to be done. And it's not fun for fans to tank, but the future might be better for it.
Well, if you look at the roster, this looks like a roster to me that was put together to try to compete, and try and be scrappy, but definitely a lack of talent, a lack of high-end talent, especially over on the forward side. I think we're 2 or 3 impact forwards, from really having a good team here. So again, we're not really in the arc to compete yet. So now, you're talking about regaining picks and regaining assets, and I think Mike Greer will be conscious of that. I think you might see a little bit more movement around the trade deadline to try to acquire more pieces for the upcoming draft. You already have 2 really good blue chippers in Bordelot and in Eklund, right? And Eklund is from all accounts is going to be the bat or the Robin to whoever Batman will be, as a number 1 center. So I think the Sharks are still on the lookout for that high end number 1 prospect that they can pair with William Eklund. So they can he can start his career with a twosome with someone else, and really be able to thrive off of that player. How that's going to come, whether that's through trades, free agency, or drafting, I think is anybody's guess. But I think Mike Greer kind of has that highlight, that shadow highlight around William Eklund's name, saying, "Hey, I need another prospect to pair with this guy." So again, it would not surprise me if we do see maybe a little bit more movement, or even maybe a wink, wink, nudge, nudge here, there about making playoffs. And if they're already out of it by, let's say the trade deadline, that, maybe could just go full tank mode and try and get a better shot at a Bedard or one of the other forwards, that's available. So, again, it definitely much more of that rebuilding arc, kind of bottoming out, if you want to put it that way. I think again, you look at the exodus of talent from last year to this year, and you look at it from the prior seasons. This is a team that has continually lost good pieces, necessitated by the cap. And again, before that cap goes up, I think that they're going to have to shed some more salary, get a little bit leaner, from that perspective. Then they can have a little bit more flexibility to go sign some forwards, and maybe again can integrate some younger players once these veterans have kind of moved on. But again, it's hard because a guy like Matt Benning was just signed for 4 years. I mean, like, I don't I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like it's a guy that is signed for 1.25 million. You know, he was the analytics darling because of a lot of block shots, but you know, signing that guy for 4 years and he's a right-handed defenseman. I mean, that's Ryan Merkley's spot, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
know, that's a guy that's directly being placed in front of Ryan Merkley. And you know, Merkley has said all the right things in the Barracuda training camp and hasn't been pouty and hasn't been, you know, too emotional about not getting the spot. But it is a different message being sent than from the previous regime. And I think the players kind of just need to figure out their way in this system. And I think we're just starting to figure out where the tendencies lie with both David Quinn and Mike Greer.
Before we get to the last couple questions, a little word from our sponsors here at DraftKings. Hockey fans, it's finally time to hit the ice again, and thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you're in for a season of a lifetime. New customers can bet $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets if they win. Do you want to bet on the opener for the Kings on Tuesday? Lay down your tough odds and win $200. If that isn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game and get $200 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. Well, we're talking about youth. Carter Scores comes in here with another question here. Which Sharks prospect do you feel highest on? And then maybe which Sharks prospect will have the most impact this season?
Okay, Thomas Bordeleau is going to be the guy that I feel the highest on right now. Like I said before, he had a little bit better of a camp than Eklund did. But another guy that I liked was Daniele Gushkin. He had a very good camp. He had a hat trick in the final preseason before they went out to Germany and playing the Ice Baron. So you know, those are two guys that I highlighted that had really good camps. That I feel kind of highest on in the organization at the moment. If you're just talking about overall talent and who has the best talent within the Sharks pool, it's got to be William Eklund, right? I mean, the guy was a steal at where we got him in the draft, a guy that has the talent. But again, I think he's still adapting a little bit to the North American ice, and still there's a little bit of filling out he has to do with his stature and things like that. Thomas Bordeleau doesn't require, or not require, but doesn't really utilize his size in the same way that a William Eklund would do to shield the puck. He's more of a undersized forward, but a more of a skill type guy who got a very good sauce pass and it's got a wicked wrister. So, you know, Thomas Bordeleau to me is a guy that's more NHL ready than William Eklund is right now. I think a guy like Thomas Bordeleau could get put on the third line and do well and thrive there. I'm not sure you'd want to do that to Eklund. I think he's a top six forward or don't play him at all type of forward, and I think that's where he needs to be deployed. So for me, it's boards. But again, you know, this team has got a few forwards that I'm kind of looking at, like, okay, where are we at, guys? Like Isaiah Weisblatt, you know, a guy that's going to start on the Barracuda. You have Brandon Coe, another guy that I'm very excited to see down on the Barracuda and stuff. And so just having those young players all play together on the CUDA, I think is going to be the best thing for them. But I do think we'll see either Thomas or William get a call up and get some time in the NHL this season, especially if we think it's going to go a little sideways. You know, it could be that carrot dangle at the end of the season to bring them up. So for me, it's going to be interesting to see how they end up handling these guys and how they end up integrating them back into the roster, and if they even get some time up at the big club this year.
I mean, I think Kings fans are still waiting for some of these prospects that they've been so high on to come up and make some noise. Kaliev and Velarde, though, led the team in points in the preseason. Obviously, the major starters, like Kopitar and Fiala don't play as many games as those young guys do, but it's good to see that they're finally starting to make an impact. I'm sure Sharks fans are going to be buying their AHL TV packages to see some of the prospects come up there. Last question before I let you go there, Landy. We already talked about expectations from fans. If you were to look in your crystal ball and do a little seance, where are you thinking that this season's going to end up if you were to look forward?
Okay, if I'm looking at it, from a perspective of where this team is going to end up. First off, I don't think that there's any illusions. There's going to be two teams from the Central that are going to win the wild cards. I think in the West, I think the Central just has all the power. The Pacific Division really just, outside of Edmonton, who I think will win the division. You've got Calgary, who had a lot of flux this year. You've got a up and coming Los Angeles Kings team. You've got an up and coming Anaheim Ducks team. Don't look out, but the Seattle Kraken are starting to amass pieces and stuff too. Although I don't think that they're gonna make a run for the division or anything like that. But like I was saying, I don't even think the Sharks are the fourth best team in the Pacific. They're either fourth or fifth. And again, I just don't see them having the horses to compete. I mean, in my bracket, I had Edmonton winning the Pacific. I had the Kings at third, I think. And then at second, I just put Calgary there, but they could fall flat on their face just as well as, maybe even making a run for first place. I just don't know because of how much flux was in that team. But, when you add a guy like Huberdeau, a proven point getter, and some other sneaky good picks that Calgary's got, I think that they could stay around. So for the Sharks, I suspect a seventh place finish in the well, let's see, no, not seventh. I would say ninth place, right? Because you have the three division, you have the three tops in the division. So, and then two wild cards, right? So 8 total spots. And I think that they'll probably finish right outside of that, 9th or 10th in the West. And again, I think it's going to be more of the same, and it might even be worse than it was last year.
Yeah, I think that you're maybe a little higher than a lot of us are, but again, I'm a Kings fan, and I don't really care for the Sharks doing well, and nor do I want you to get some lottery luck and get Bedard either. I don't want to see that guy in the West for years.
So you'd rather see us 8th or 9th?
Yeah, I want a little less lottery luck for you guys. The tale of two blades, as they call it. So. I think it's going to be an interesting season there. I mean, obviously, I think it was more of the same of last season, where if the Stars can carry you consistently, you're going to win some games there. But it's also going to come down to, hey, it's hard to do that. It's hard to be on your game every single year. You need the second, third, and fourth lines to back you up when the first line isn't doing well. And we saw that for a long time with the Kings, that Kopitar was really the only line that ever worked. And, that's why the team amassed all those picks as they did. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, I think the Pacific's going to be a lot better than what it was last year. I think that there's going to be also a log jam teams 3 through 5 or 3 through 6, because I think the middle of the pack got better, I think. And then, you're not going to have as many 110-point teams or 105-point teams. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a log jam. So it should be still some good hockey. Well, and I appreciate you coming on here, Landy. I know it's early for you over there, so I hope get out, enjoy the sunshine and watch some football there. I know the Niners are coming on at 3:00 for all you Northern California and this Texas guy right here. Going to be throwing on my jersey very soon. But I appreciate you coming on. Any last words for you, my man?
No, just thank you very much. And thank you to all your listeners. I might have, the biggest spot against the Kings, right? But at the end of the day, I like to see California hockey do well. I think when any of the teams in California do well and represent our state, I'm very happy about that. Even though it is LA, but it can't all be perfect. But no, I think it's going to be interesting times for California, because I think you've got the Trevor Zegrases of the world and the Craig McTavish over on the Ducks, and I think he's going to really, really start to elevate that team. I think that team could maybe turn some heads, and I think LA as well. They've got a team that is starting to have that good mix of veteran and young players, and I think now we'll start to see maybe a guy like Byfield or a guy like Velarde really start to morph the season, and that's why I said I picked you guys to be third in the division, because I just think that this is you're kind of on the upswing now, and I like the ads that you had in the off season with Dano and Fiala, and Kempe, and just another year of Adrian Kempe, and Kalyev as well. I mean, these are guys that I think are in a good position to start to be better, and I think with a guy like Anze Kopitar leading the charge, I think that this team could surprise and could pull up third in this division. So excited for California hockey, because it seems like the two Southern California teams are on the upswing. And the Sharks have some work to do, but we're getting there, and I think we've got a good direction now. And I think the regime change has kind of refocused the organization and really put an emphasis on drafting and developing where it should have been.
Yeah. Well, and follow Eric Landy at Eric Landy and at Teal Town USA for all your Sharks news, whether when we're playing them or if you just want to see what's going on in the Pacific. You can't get enough hockey here for California hockey. Go ahead and go on our website at hockeyroyalty.com for all your articles. Follow us at hockey_royalty. Follow me at Rando Commando 24. It's going to be a fun year, man. Hockey starts next week for us. It's already started for you guys. Good to see the puck drop. And as always on this podcast, go Kings go.
Thanks.